um, and this is the next part is Vietnam is the USA. When, why, and how long did the US get involved in Vietnam War? Why was the US defeated in Vietnam? And Vietnam War was from the 1954 to 1957, a protracted conflict that pitted the communist government of the North Vietnam and its allied in South Vietnam known as Việt Cộng, and against the government of South Vietnam and its principal ally, the United States. Over 20 reasons why the US got involved in Vietnam War. The first is the communist containment policy and the domino theory. The second is the impact of the Cold War. The third is the fault of France and the US intervention. The fourth is the division of Vietnam after the Geneva Accords of in 1954 divided Vietnam into two parts with the North and the South. And next is the political instability in South of Vietnam and the Gulf Tonkin incident. And after that, the Vietnam War was a result of combination of global geopolitical factors and internal issues within Vietnam, where each side had its own goals and circumstances, but was heavily influenced by external powers. And the reason why the US was defeated in Vietnam. One of the primary difficulties was the nature of the enemy and the type of warfare they employed. The South Vietnamese Communist guerrilla force and the North Vietnamese army used unconventional tactics and thus were unfamiliar to the U.S. military. This is hit and run tactic, the extensive use of a network of tunnel, making it difficult for U.S. forces to engage them directly or achieve decisive victories. And the terrain and the climate of Vietnam also poses significant changes. The dance of jungle, mountains, and swamps of Vietnam were vastly different from the environments in which the U.S. military has traditionally fought. This condition hindered the mobility of the U.S. force and made it difficult to locate and engage the enemy. Moreover, the tropical climate with its heavy rains and extreme heat further complicated military operations and took a toll on the health and morale of American soldiers. So, who was Việt Cộng? Việt Cộng, the guerrillas force that, with the support of the North Vietnamese army, fought against the South Vietnam and the United States. The name is said to have first been used by South Vietnam by President Ngô Đình Diệm and to bad later the rebels. And what country supported Vietnam during the struggle against the U.S.? It's the China. China's support for North Vietnam when the U.S. started to intervene includes both financial aid and the development of hundreds of thousands of military personnel in support roles. The Soviet Union prior to 1967, the Soviet Union provided military assistance by assisting North Vietnamese Air Forces personnel. And Vietnam was supported by Cuba, North Korea, East Germany, Romania, Hungary for doctors, engineers, military equipment, advisors, logistical and political support. And after the event of the fall of Saigon, to which country did Vietnamese boarding people and refugees go? Actually, they go to a lot of countries, like the first destination were Hong Kong and the Southeast Asian locations like Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand. The second locations is the United States, Canada, Italy, Australia, France, West Germany, and the United Kingdom. And they left Vietnam because of some reasons. First, they were persecuted. The new communist government viewed those associates with the former South Vietnam regimes and as enemies. Many were sent to re-education camps or imprisoned, and they might lose freedom. Moreover, the second reason is because of the economic hardship. Post-war economy collapsed, and the state-controlled economy led to shortage, hunger, and poverty. So they want to find a better life. So how is the relationship between Vietnam and US nowadays? Do you hate American for what they did to our country and people? Actually, I want to say that in 2025, Vietnam relations will mark important anniversaries. 50 years since the end of Vietnam Wars and 30 years since the normalization of US-Vietnam relations. And at this time, the relationships would be as a comprehensive strategic partnership, highest in Vietnam diplomatic canon. And there's no reason to think that any further future leader in Vietnam would seek to slow momentum in those deepening relationships. No, the time is past. It's about over 50 years since since the war ended. So we need to focus on the future, not the past. Moreover, Vietnamese view the U.S. as a partner for growth, technology, education. Americans today are friendly, respectful, open-minded. There are some reasons why I didn't hate Americans for what they did to do our country. The Vietnamese and the Vietnamese and China. There are 4 periods of the Chinese domination. The first period is from the 179 BCE to the 1440 CE. This includes ruled by the Triều dynasty and the Han dynasty, and it ended with the brave revolt of the Chung sister. The second period from 43 to 544. Following the suppression of the Chung sister rebellion, the Chinese authority was restated under the Eastern Han dynasty, and this period would end by revolt of Li Bun, who took advantage of the internal disorder of the winning Liang dynasty. The third period from the 1602 to 1939. This is ended by the Bạch Đằng battle in 1938, and the 4 periods from the 14 and the 1408 to the 1428 CE, and it was ended by the Lam Sơn uprising led by Lê Lợi, and a lot of crimes that the Chinese domination authorities commit numerous crimes in various aspects of Vietnam society. In terms of policy, the ruling authorities aim to erase Vietnam as an independent nation by annexing its territories into China, turning Vietnam into another district under the Chinese control. They imposed harsh law and ruthlessly suppressed uprising by the Vietnamese people seeking independence. In terms of economics, they are plundering natural resources and very good to send as tribute to the governor. Local officers are also subjected the people to heavy taxes and forced labor. In terms of culture, the Chinese imposed a legal Han legal system in Vietnam and forcing the people to conform to the Han custom. And make the introduction of the following people, emphasize their achievement. Trần Hưng Đạo, Quang Trung, Lý Thường Kiệt, and Ngô Quyền. Trần Hưng Đạo was a figure of almost legendary proportion in Vietnamese history, a brilliant military strategist who defeated 2 Mongol invasions and became a cultural hero among modern Vietnamese. His Hiệp Tướng Sĩ is proclamation to the officers remains as a legendary piece of military literature. emphasizing patriotism and discipline. Today, he is reserved as a symbol of Vietnamese resilience and strategic brilliance. And Quang Trung or Nguyễn Huệ was the second emperor of the Taishan dynasty, was the most formidable leader of the Taishan dynasty and a revolutionary military generals. And his greatest achievement was the Battle of Ngọc Hồi Đồng Đa, were led a lightning fast campaign that annihilated the Queen and army and secured annihilate the Queen and army and secured Vietnam independence from Chinese dominations. And Quang Trung's leadership embodies resilience, bravery, and national unity, resonating deeply in Vietnamese cultural identity. Lý Thường Kiệt, his real name is Ngo Tuấn and was a Vietnamese general and admirer of the Lý dynasty. He was a brilliant general and statesman under the Lý dynasty. He is the best remembered for carrying out a preemptive attack against the Song dynasty troops, is launching a proactive military campaign unprecedented. So, Nam Quoc Sơn Ha, Mountains and River of the Southern Country poems, he is the author, and Lý Thường Kiệt is celebrated for his strategic visions and poetic patriotism. Ngo Quyên is the founder of Vietnam's first independent feudal dynasty and the leader who ended over 1,000 years of the Chinese domination. And following their history, he established Ngo dynasty, marking the beginning of an era of self-rule for Đại Việt. And why did China repeatedly invaded Vietnam? Not China, but a lot of countries invaded Vietnam in so many times, in so many years. But actually, I want to say that Vietnam has strategic locations, geopolitical locations along coastlines, rich in sea resources, and the vast sea areas. So it is important to protect our territory. So when did Mongolia invade Vietnam? Why was it defeated? The first invasion in 1258, the Mongols were defeated by Emperor Deng Thái Tông, and the second invasion is 1285. The Mongol was defeated by Trần Hưng Đạo, and the third invasion is 1288. The Mongols were defeated by Trần Quốc Tuấn at the Battle of Bạch Đằng, and the victory was also a result of the pure spirit of sacrifice and determination to fight and win, with the army serving as the backbone of the resistance. What was the lasting official between the Vietnam and China border war? What were the reasons for the war? The Sino-Vietnamese War, a brief conflict that occurred in early 1978 between China and Vietnam. China launched an offensively ostensibly in response to Vietnam invasions and occupation of Cambodia in 1978, which ended the rule of Chinese by Khmer Rouge. The conflict lasted for about a month, with China withdrawing its troops in March 1979. And how is the relationship between Vietnam and China nowadays? In recent years, the relationship between Vietnam and China has gone beyond the usual friendly neighborly diplomacy, which both sides standing of the highest level of respect to one another. So the last one is the concept cultural and the religions in Vietnam. And I want to give you some information about the concept, cultural, brief history, significance, architectures. Sunset Cathedral is located in the heart of Hanoi and is one of the most iconic and oldest Catholic churches in Vietnam. The construction began in 1884, and the church was one of the first structures built by the colonial government of French Indochina when it opened in December 1886 and is the oldest church in Hanoi. And the church brings an ancient and peaceful beauty inside bustling Hanoi. It has a length of 60.5 meters with a width of more than 20 meters. The facade consists of two square bell towers with a height of more than 31 meters and a big block which looked like the Notre Dame de Paris. And on the top is stone across in front of the church. There's a statue of Mother Maria made copper and decorated with iron fences. Joseph Cathedral is typical structure of Gothic architecture in Vietnam, which became very popular in Europe from the middle of the 18th centuries. And some shortly present the following 5 most prominent religions in Vietnam. You should explain the history development of each religions in Vietnam, the current number of followers of each religions in Vietnam, the main contents and exercise of each religions, and other interesting information. So the first one is Buddhism. Buddhism may first come to Vietnam as early as the 3rd or 2nd century BC from the Indian subcontinent or from China in the 1st or 2nd century CE. It flourished during the Lian dynasty and when it was the state religion, and estimates more than 40 million followers, about 33% of the population in Vietnam in 2021. And many Vietnam follows folk Buddhism, blending it with ancestor worship and local traditions. And the second is Roman Catholicism. It's introduced in the 16th centuries by Portuguese and French missionaries, especially in Jesuits, strongly promoted during the French colonial period, and they believe in God, Jesus Christ, and as Savior, people, heaven, and hell. Practice include attending Mass, prayer, confession, sacraments, and celebrations like Christmas and Easter draw large crowds even among non-Catholics. The third is Taoism. Vietnamese found religion and established in Tây Ninh province and created during the French colonial areas as a synthesis of major world religions to promote peace and unity. And the fourth is Protestantism. It was introduced by American missionaries in the early century, especially during the French and American wars, and it spread mainly among ethnic minorities in the Central Highland and some urban areas. And the fifth is Hoa Hao Buddhism. It's founded in 1939 in Mekong Delta, An Giang province, and its reformist Buddhist movement aims at simplifying Buddhist practice and making more accessible to rural farmers. And they emphasize personal moral conduct, simplicity, social justice, and ancestral worship, and the followers mostly worship at home rather than in temple. It is difficult for Catholics to find a job in Vietnam government. In general, it's not officially difficult for a Catholic to find a job in Vietnamese government. We are freedom of religions, and But in some sensitive positions, especially those related to national security, military, or high-ranking leadership role, religious backgrounds may be a factor considered during recruitment or promotion. So, make the introduction of Đạo Mẫu in Vietnam. Đạo Mẫu Mother Goddess worship is a unique indigenous belief in Vietnam. Belief system in Vietnam that honor the worship of female deities known as mothers. So we have some types of mothers, like mother of upper sky, mother of the forest, mother of waters, mother of earth. So spirit mediumship is the most iconic practice in Đạo Mẫu, and a traditional music form performed during Lindong rituals is a spirit mediumship. And Đạo Mẫu was recognized by UNESCO in 2016 as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity, especially for its practice related to belief in the mother goddesses of three realms. Thank you for listening.